The village of Ikuro lay cradled between gentle hills and the broad arms of ancient baobab trees whose roots twisted like the stories of old. Each dawn broke with the sound of pestles striking rhythmically against mortars, the fragrance of roasting maize drifting through the air, and the deep, distant hum of drums calling the villagers to life. The marketplace awoke in a shimmer of color, woven fabrics catching the sunlight, laughter ringing between stalls of clay pots and baskets of ripe fruit. Beneath the vast African sky, life pulsed in rhythm with the heartbeat of the land. It was here that Ebony had come, carrying with her both hope and fear, for she was no longer the daughter of her father's house but the wife of Kola, the first son of a powerful family. Ebony had always been known for her quiet grace. Her skin glowed like polished ebony, her eyes deep as night water, and when she smiled, it was like dawn spilling softly over the fields. Her father had taught her patience, her mother wisdom. But marriage, everyone had warned, was a river whose depth could not be guessed from its surface. Her husband, Kola, was kind and proud, with shoulders broad enough to carry his family's name. Yet his mother, Mama Keisai, ruled that name like a queen whose crown could never be shared. Mama Keisai was the kind of woman whose presence filled a room before she even spoke. Her voice, when raised, could cut through laughter like a blade through silk. Her eyes missed nothing, not the way a wife served her husband, not the way she knelt to greet elders, not even the faintest hesitation in her tone. People in the village said that once Mama Keisai had been beautiful, but the years had shaped her beauty into something sharper. Pride polished her words and bitterness guarded her heart. She was proud of her son, of the wealth their compound boasted, and of her authority, which none dared question. When Ebony entered that house as a bride, she brought with her a small wooden box carved with symbols of protection. Inside it rested the necklace, a string of smooth red and white beads passed down through generations of women in her family. Her grandmother had told her, "These beads carry the truth of your blood. They will protect you when tongues sharpen against you." Ebony had touched the beads on her wedding morning, feeling a strange warmth pulse beneath her fingers. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory, both warning and comfort. The beads know the heart that wears them. On her first day in her husband's home, Ebony wore the necklace proudly around her neck. The beads gleamed in the sunlight as she knelt before Mama Keisai, presenting kola nuts and palm oil as a sign of respect. Mama Keisai's eyes had flicked to the necklace immediately. "Those are old beads," she said, her tone cool but her gaze sharp. "You should not wear things from your mother's house when you have entered another." Ebony smiled softly, lowering her gaze. "They are a blessing from my grandmother, Mama. They are meant to bring peace." "Peace?" Mama Keisai had scoffed, her lips curving in a thin smile. "Peace is earned, not worn." That night, as the compound settled under the glow of moonlight, Ebony sat outside her hut listening to the distant drumming from the neighboring village. The air was cool, scented with earth and cooking fires. Her husband's laughter drifted faintly from inside, but her thoughts were far away. She ran her fingers along the beads, each one smooth yet alive, as though it pulsed faintly with its own breath. Somewhere deep within, a whisper of unease stirred. She could not name it, but she felt it, as if something unseen had already begun shifting around her. In the days that followed, Ebony tried to please her mother-in-law. She woke before dawn, swept the compound, fetched water from the well, and cooked the family's meals with quiet diligence. The villagers who saw her often said she had the patience of the river, calm on the surface, strong beneath. Yet no matter how hard she tried, Mama Keisai always found fault. If the stew was too thick, she scolded. If the floor too dusty, she frowned. "A wife must bring honor to her husband's name," she would say, her tone dripping with disapproval. Kola tried to defend his wife at first, but even he feared his mother's temper. So Ebony learned to smile through the sharpness of words, to bow her head and swallow her pride. Only the necklace around her neck offered silent comfort, warm when she felt weak, cold when danger lurked near. One afternoon, while pounding yam, Ebony noticed Mama Keisai watching her from the doorway, eyes fixed again on the necklace. The older woman's expression was unreadable, half curiosity, half resentment. "Those beads," Mama Keisai murmured, "they do not belong here." Ebony hesitated. "They were given to me for protection, Mama." Mama Keisai's smile tightened. "Protection from whom? Do you fear my home?" "No, Mama," Ebony replied softly, though her fingers instinctively touched the beads. But as the sun dipped behind the baobab trees, the air seemed to grow heavier. Somewhere in the forest beyond, a drumbeat changed its rhythm, deeper, slower, like a warning. Ebony felt it in her chest, in the space between her breaths. She looked once more at her mother-in-law's face and saw something there, a flicker of envy perhaps, or of something older, darker, waiting to wake. That night, when the last light faded from the sky, the wind carried a whisper through the village, of spirits watching, of truth waiting to be revealed. And as Ebony lay in her bed, her necklace glimmering faintly in the moonlight, she sensed that the beads were not merely ornaments. They were eyes, silent witnesses to what was coming, to what her mother-in-law's heart might yet unleash. The morning after her wedding, Ebony awoke to the scent of burning wood and the steady clatter of pots echoing through the courtyard. The air inside her new home felt heavier than she had imagined, not unkind but watchful. Every sound, every movement seemed to carry meaning. She rose quietly, wrapped her shawl, and stepped out to greet the day. Around her, Mama Kesai's compound stretched wide and proud. Mud walls smoothed with red clay, a large cooking shed to one side, and rows of drying gourds hanging like ornaments beneath the eaves. It was the home of a family respected across the region, a place where traditions were honored and authority was never questioned. Ebony had been told by her own mother that marriage was a second birth, one entered not with crying but with courage. So she carried herself gently, like the whisper of rain, learning the rhythms of her new world. Her husband Olu was kind and soft-spoken. He would smile at her shyly each morning, asking if she had eaten or slept well. But his kindness, like the sun filtered through cloud, was often dimmed by the shadow of his mother. Mama Kesai ran the household like a chief commands warriors. Her voice was steady, her gaze piercing, her word final. At first, Ebony thought she might win her favor through obedience. She swept the yard until her palms were raw, cooked soups rich with palm oil, and fetched water from the distant stream without complaint. Yet nothing she did seemed to please the older woman. When Ebony's stew was too salty, Mama Kesai said, "A real wife knows her husband's tongue before she lifts the spoon." When she sang softly while pounding yam, the older woman frowned. A bride should not fill the air with noise before her elders. Even her laughter drew rebuke. Your joy comes too easily. The wise woman saves her smiles for good fortune. Olu often watched in silence, caught between the two women who framed his life. He would place a hand on his wife's shoulder in quiet apology when his mother's back was turned. Do not take her words to heart, he whispered once. She has lost much in her life. But Ebony could not shake the feeling that what Mama Kesai had lost, she now sought to reclaim through control. Days turned into weeks, and whispers began to stir among the women at the market. Some said Mama Kesai envied the youth and beauty of her son's wife. Others claimed the older woman feared the power of the necklace Ebony wore, the one said to be blessed by ancestral spirits. Whenever Ebony passed, a few of them exchanged knowing looks. A mother who cannot share her son's love, one woman murmured, drinks bitterness like palm wine. Ebony pretended not to hear, but the weight of their words pressed on her like heat at midday. Still, she remained patient, her silence a quiet rebellion. Only when she was alone did she touch her necklace and whisper to the spirits of her ancestors for strength. The beads pulsed faintly beneath her fingers as if answering her prayer. At dusk, when the drummers in the distance began their low rhythms and the air filled with the scent of roasted yam, Ebony looked across the courtyard at Mama Kesai's silhouette framed by the firelight. Her mother-in-law's bracelets clinked as she stirred a pot, her expression unreadable. In that moment, Ebony understood, she was not merely a new wife in this house, she was an intruder in another woman's kingdom. And though Mama Kesai smiled in the presence of neighbors, behind those smiles lived something sharper than envy, something waiting, patient and coiled like a snake in the grass. The necklace had been the last thing Ebony's mother pressed into her hands before death carried her beyond the veil. It had been a quiet evening then, with crickets humming and the smell of rain in the air. Her mother's breath had grown shallow, but her voice, though frail, still held power. These beads, she whispered, tracing each one with trembling fingers, belong to the women who came before us. Every color carries a blessing. The red for courage, the white for truth, the black for endurance, and the gold for wisdom. Wear them close, my child, for they will see what eyes cannot. Ebony had promised to guard the necklace as she would guard her own breath. It had never left her neck since that day, not even on her wedding night. The smooth beads rested against her skin like a heartbeat from another world, familiar, protective, and alive in ways words could not explain. But in Mama Kesai's home, that same necklace was a source of unease. The older woman's eyes often darted to it as though it were a serpent coiled against her daughter-in-law's chest. One morning, while Ebony was washing clothes by the stream, Mama Kesai approached. Her shadow stretched long across the water. "Child," she said in a tone that made the word sound more like an accusation than affection. Why do you cling to that thing? Are we not enough family for you here? Ebony paused, the cold water lapping at her hands. It was my mother's blessing, Mama. It protects me. Mama Kasai snorted, her bangles clinking sharply. Protection? From what? You bring charms from your mother's house into mine, and you call it protection? Do you think spirits live in beads? Ebony lowered her eyes. They live in remembrance, Mama. That is what my people believe. Mama Kasai's lips twisted into a thin smile. Remembrance can become a chain if you are not careful. Be sure your necklace does not bind you to things that should remain buried. That night, the compound slept beneath a bright full moon. The baobab trees whispered softly, their shadows long and shifting. Ebony sat near her doorway, threading millet seeds through a cloth, when she noticed a faint shimmer on her chest. The beads glowed softly, pulsing like embers. Startled, she cupped her hand over them, yet the light seeped through her fingers, gentle but alive. In that same moment she heard a faint rustle near the wall. A snake, slender and dark, slithered from the shadows. It paused, its tongue flicking the air as if sensing her. Then, instead of drawing closer, it turned away, slipping silently into the tall grass. Ebony's breath caught. In the morning she told Olu what she had seen, but he only laughed nervously. Perhaps it is the light playing tricks. Do not fill your mind with spirits, my love. But even he looked uneasy when the beads gleamed faintly again that night. Word spread quickly as it always did. The women at the market began to murmur. Some said the necklace was blessed, others whispered that it was cursed. When Mama Kasai heard, her anger flared like dry grass touched by fire. A chain of witchcraft, she spat, pointing a trembling finger. No good woman carries such things into her husband's house. The ancestors of this family will not sleep peacefully if evil beads glow in their courtyard. The following day the village priest came to bless the compound, his white robes fluttering in the breeze. He was an old man with eyes like deep wells, eyes that had seen too much and understood more than he ever said. When his gaze fell upon Ebony's necklace, he paused. He reached out slowly, his fingertips hovering just above the beads, never touching. These are old, he murmured, his voice almost reverent. Older than you know. They carry not only blessings but warnings. Their power shines brightest when truth is tested. Ebony's heart thudded. What kind of warning, Father? The priest only smiled faintly, his wrinkles deepening like cracks in the earth. That protection and punishment often come from the same hand. Wear them wisely, child. The beads remember everything. As he turned to leave, the wind stirred through the trees, and the necklace warmed against Ebony's skin. Somewhere in the distance, a drumbeat rolled through the night, slow, deliberate, and ancient, as if the ancestors themselves had stirred in their sleep. The air shimmered with heat in celebration that afternoon, the compound alive with laughter and the smell of roasted goat. A great feast had been called by Mama Kasai to honor a visiting uncle, an elder from a neighboring village whose opinion carried weight in matters of family and reputation. Drummers beat steady rhythms near the gate, women moved in bright garments like a field of wildflowers, and children darted between the adults, their laughter rising like birdsong. Ebony had spent the morning cooking alongside the others, sweat glistening on her brow as she stirred pots of stew and pounded yam until her arms ached. Yet despite her efforts, Mama Kasai's disapproval lingered like a shadow over her shoulder. By the time the guests were seated on woven mats, Ebony had arranged the dishes, bowls of spicy soup, fried plantain, and roasted fowl, with careful precision. Her necklace gleamed faintly at her throat, catching the afternoon sun, the beads pulsing with a quiet life of their own. She knelt before the elder, serving him with both hands, her movements graceful and respectful. But Mama Kasai's eyes followed her every gesture, her lips tightening with each smile Ebony received from the guests. When one of the women commented, "Your daughter-in-law has good hands, Mama Kasai. She will bring blessings to your household," the older woman's jaw hardened. She forced a thin smile, but the bitterness behind it was visible to all. "She is learning," Mama Kasai said, her voice like a blade wrapped in cloth. "But blessings come from humility, not from beads and pretty faces." A hush rippled through the group, though no one dared respond. Ebony felt the words cut deep, but she kept her head bowed, her eyes fixed on the ground. She had learned long ago that silence was safer than defiance. As the feast went on, the drumming grew louder and the laughter rose again. But Mama Kasai's temper simmered beneath her calm exterior. Each time Ebony moved, her mother-in-law's gaze followed, until at last, when Ebony bent to pour palm wine into the elder's cup, the older woman's patience snapped. "Enough. Mama Keisai's voice cracked through the air like thunder. The drummers faltered. All eyes turned toward her. She stood abruptly, pointing at Ebony's chest. "Take off that necklace. I will not have witchcraft displayed at my table." Ebony froze, her heart pounding. "Mama, it is not witchcraft. It is a blessing from my mother." "Lies." Mama Keisai's voice rose higher. "You bring your dead mother's spirits into my home and you call it a blessing? You shame me before my guests." Before anyone could intervene, Mama Keisai strode forward and seized the necklace. Ebony gasped as the beads dug into her skin, the cord tightening around her neck. Then, with a violent tug, it snapped. The sound, a sharp crack, seemed to silence the world. Beads scattered across the floor, rolling in all directions, their colors flashing like drops of fire and blood. One bead bounced against the clay hearth, another disappeared beneath a mat. A third rolled into Ebony's open palm, and as she tried to catch it, its sharp edge cut her skin. She hissed softly, watching her blood bead up and fall into the dust. It mingled there, forming a small dark stain that seemed to shimmer faintly before sinking into the earth. The guests sat frozen, uncertain whether to speak. Olu rose halfway, torn between his wife and his mother, his voice trembling. "Mama, please?" But Mama Keisai only stood there, breathing hard, the broken string of beads dangling from her fist. Her eyes gleamed with something too fierce to be simple anger. "Let the spirits you worship protect you now," she spat, throwing the fragments to the ground. The feast ended in uneasy silence. Guests left early, murmuring among themselves, their laughter replaced by whispers. Ebony gathered the scattered beads in trembling hands, tears blurring her vision. Some had cracked, others had vanished entirely. When she lifted her eyes, Mama Keisai was watching from the doorway, her face unreadable, half triumph, half something else, something shadowed. That night, the compound fell unnaturally still. No crickets sang. The drums from neighboring huts seemed muted, distant. Even the wind held its breath. Ebony lay awake, staring at the spot where her necklace once lay on the wooden stool. The air felt thick, heavy with something unseen. In the courtyard, the fire had long gone out, but a faint glow seemed to linger where her blood had touched the dust. The chickens refused to roost nearby. Somewhere deep within the baobab trees, a whisper rose, soft, steady, and chilling. When dawn finally came, none in the compound spoke of the silence that had blanketed the night. But every soul who had been there felt it. The moment the beads broke, something ancient had awakened. The night after the feast was darker than any Ebony had ever known. The moon hid behind swollen clouds, and even the crickets seemed to hush their songs. Within the courtyard, where laughter and music had echoed only hours before, the earth now lay still, except for the faint shimmer of beads half buried in the dust. They pulsed with a dim, rhythmic light, like the beating of a heart beneath the soil. Ebony sat in her hut, her palms still burning from the cut Mama Keisai had caused. Every time she looked at her hand, the tiny wound seemed to glimmer faintly, as though something ancient stirred within her blood. Sleep refused to come. When she finally drifted into restless dreams, she found herself standing at the edge of a vast river. Mist rose from the waters, carrying whispers that sounded like her mother's voice, and behind it, countless others. The faces of her ancestors emerged from the rippling surface. Men and women adorned with the same beads that once circled her neck. Their eyes glowed like embers, calm yet filled with judgment. "My child," they murmured, their voices blending like wind through reeds. "Blood has touched our blessings. Truth will rise. The proud shall taste the weight of what they broke." Ebony reached out, trembling, but the water swallowed their images, leaving only her reflection, and a faint red glow spreading from her chest outward, like veins of fire beneath her skin. She woke with a start. The night air was heavy and strange, thick with the scent of wet earth though it hadn't rained. When she stepped outside, her eyes widened. The beads, the same ones Mama Keisai had thrown aside, were no longer scattered randomly. They had arranged themselves in a perfect circle around the compound, each glowing faintly as if breathing. From a distance, the pattern looked almost like the necklace reborn, yet its center lay empty, waiting. Inside Mama Keisai's hut, something stirred. The older woman tossed and turned, clutching her chest. Her breath came in sharp, painful gasps. When she tried to call out, her voice broke into a strangled whisper. She could feel something small and hard pressing beneath her skin, just under her collarbone, then her ribs, then her palms. It was as though invisible beads were weaving themselves through her flesh, threading pain into her bones. The next morning, the household awoke to unease. Olu was confused and frightened. His mother claimed the spirits had cursed her. Ebony said little, her face calm though her heart raced. When she looked down at the ground, she noticed that wherever she walked, the faintest shimmer followed her, traces of bead light dancing in the dust. By midday the villagers had begun to murmur. Goats refused to enter the compound. The wind circled the yard like a restless spirit, moaning through the baobab branches. Children said they saw figures walking by the river at night, old, shining faces whispering Ebony's name. The priest came quietly to observe and shook his head. "There is no curse," he said softly. "Only justice. What was broken is binding itself again." Mama Kasai, pale and trembling, could no longer hide her suffering. She screamed that the beads haunted her, that they crawled beneath her skin when she tried to sleep. But every time she accused Ebony of witchcraft, the pain worsened. The more she shouted, the more her body convulsed with invisible weight. It was as if the spirits themselves pressed their hands upon her chest, demanding silence. That night, thunder rumbled far in the distance though no storm came. The baobab leaves shivered as if listening to unseen drums. Inside her hut, Ebony knelt before a single remaining bead, one she had found near her doorway. It pulsed gently in her palm, casting light on her tear-streaked face. "Ancestors," she whispered, "I seek peace, not vengeance." The bead's glow dimmed for a moment, then brightened again, steady and calm, like the heartbeat of forgiveness waiting to be earned. Far across the compound, Mama Kasai lay awake, the sound of faint rattling filling her ears, not outside but within her own body. The beads had awakened, and the truth she had buried beneath cruelty now rose like dawn after endless darkness. By the third day after the feast, the entire village could feel that something was wrong within Mama Kasai's household. The once lively compound, known for its loud laughter and scent of roasted yam, had turned quiet and eerie. Even the goats grazing nearby gave it a wide berth. Women fetching water at the river whispered that at night, strange lights flickered across Mama Kasai's walls, like fireflies trapped behind clay. When Mama Kasai finally stepped outside, the villagers gasped. Her skin, once smooth and proud, seemed to shimmer under the sun, not with sweat or oil but with something unnatural. Tiny reflections danced across her arms, like beads buried beneath her flesh trying to find their way out. Some said her face glittered faintly when she turned. Others swore that her shadow flickered as though separate from her body. Children hid behind their mothers. The old men muttered that the ancestors were walking again. Olu could no longer deny what he saw. His heart thudded painfully as he watched his mother's trembling hands sparkle under the morning light. Fear gnawed at him, but guilt gnawed deeper. He remembered every time he had let her scold Ebony unfairly, every time he had turned away from his wife's silent tears. Now he looked at Ebony differently, with both love and dread. "My wife," he whispered one night, "did your mother's beads bring this upon us?" Ebony said nothing. Her gaze was fixed on the window where the moonlight pooled, soft and silver. "What we carry from our mothers," she finally murmured, "is not a curse or a gift. It is truth. And truth always finds its way home." Ebony herself seemed changed. She spoke less, ate little, and often sat by the riverbank alone. The villagers sometimes saw her tracing patterns in the water, her lips moving in prayer. They didn't know she dreamed nightly of the ancestors, standing in a great circle, their eyes glowing with calm fire. In her dreams they didn't scold her, they waited. The message was clear. Something must be confessed before balance could return. One evening the village priest, a man with white shells woven into his hair, came to the compound. His eyes carried the weight of both fear and wisdom. He stood before Mama Kasai, who was now too weak to rise, and looked around at the silent family. "This sickness is not of body," he said solemnly. "The beads you broke were bound by truth. What was destroyed in anger can only be healed by confession. Speak what your heart hides, and perhaps the spirits will listen." The wind rose suddenly, sweeping through the compound and scattering dry leaves in spirals. The baobab trees groaned as if in agreement. Mama Kasai shuddered, clutching her chest where the shimmering light pulsed beneath her skin. For the first time in years, her eyes filled with tears, not from pride but from fear. The truth the priest demanded lay heavy in her throat, and the ancestors waited for her to open her mouth and set the balance right. That night, when the moon was swollen and pale like a spirit's eye, Mama Kasai awoke gasping. The air was heavy, thick with the smell of earth after rain, though not a single drop had fallen. Her skin burned, and beneath it she felt something shift, something small and hard, moving as though alive. She clawed at her chest, choking back a scream, but her nails only met smooth, glowing flesh. Beneath it she could feel shapes forming, round, smooth beads pressing against her ribs, climbing toward her heart. A strangled cry tore through the silence. Olu, startled from his sleep, rushed to her side, but when he touched her arm, his hand recoiled. Her body pulsed with faint light, veins glowing in the rhythm of an invisible chant. "Mother," he shouted, his voice cracking. But Mama Kesai's eyes were wide and distant. "They are binding me," she whispered. "The beads, my sin, they remember." Her voice broke into a sob as tears streaked down her face. The room filled with an unearthly hum, low at first, then growing into something that seemed to rise from the ground itself. Outside, the baobab trees trembled though no wind blew. Ebony, woken by the sound, stepped into the room, her white wrap glowing faintly under the moonlight that streamed through the window. Her eyes widened as she saw Mama Kesai writhing, her skin shining with buried beads like molten stars. Olu reached for his wife, desperation clouding his face. "Help her," he pleaded. "She is my mother." Ebony took a slow step forward. She could feel the air thicken with power, the same power that had once blessed her necklace, the same force that her mother had warned her would always reveal truth. "Mama Kesai," she said softly, "you must speak. They are not here to destroy but to cleanse." Mama Kesai's voice cracked. "I was jealous," she rasped. "You came with your beauty and your calm, and my son's eyes no longer sought my approval. I feared being forgotten." Her chest convulsed, her words came out in gasps. "I called your beads witchcraft. I broke them so the spirits would not choose you over me." As she spoke, the humming deepened. The oil lamp flickered violently and then went out. Only the light from Mama Kesai's skin illuminated the room, casting strange, rippling patterns on the mud walls. Ebony knelt beside her, ignoring the heat radiating from her body. "The ancestors do not punish love," she said. "Only cruelty born from pride." Thunder rolled outside, though the sky remained clear. The room shook gently and a golden mist began to gather, swirling in circles around them. From that mist, faint figures emerged, shimmering outlines of men and women adorned with beads and feathers, their faces calm yet solemn. The air smelled of incense and rain. Olu fell to his knees, trembling, but Ebony remained still, her gaze fixed on the figures. Mama Kesai wept harder, clutching her chest. "Forgive me," she sobbed. "Forgive the heart that envied, the hand that broke what was sacred." The beads under her skin began to move again, slowly rising toward her throat, glowing brighter with each word. One of the ancestral figures stepped closer, a woman draped in woven gold. Her voice was like wind through reeds. "Truth heals," she said. "But only when spoken from the heart." Ebony took her mother-in-law's trembling hands into her own. "You are not lost," she whispered. "Speak until there is no lie left in you." Mama Kesai's confession poured out, every insult, every deceit, every shadow of envy she had hidden behind her proud eyes. And as her words filled the room, the glow began to soften, the beads sinking deeper into her skin until they vanished completely. The air calmed. The thunder faded into silence. When it was over, Mama Kesai collapsed into Ebony's arms, sobbing like a child. Outside, the first cool breeze of dawn slipped through the trees, carrying the faint scent of healing earth. The ancestors' light dimmed, but before vanishing, one voice lingered, deep, resonant, and kind. "Where confession lives, peace returns." Ebony held the older woman close, her tears falling silently onto Mama Kesai's hair. The night, though haunted, had become holy, the moment when hatred surrendered to truth, and a heart once hardened by pride finally began to beat again with mercy. The first light of dawn crept softly into the room, painting the clay walls with gold. The storm that had shaken the night had gone quiet, leaving behind a silence so deep that even the insects dared not stir. Ebony knelt beside Mama Kesai, her hands trembling as she felt the woman's body quiver, not with pain now but with release. The air was warm, charged with the remnants of something divine. The faint scent of rain hung in the air, though the sky outside was still clear. Ebony's eyes were drawn to Mama Kesai's chest, where the shimmer of buried beads pulsed faintly beneath her skin. Each pulse seemed to match her breath, slow, labored, but alive. And then, gently, something miraculous began. One by one the beads rose. They pushed through her skin without breaking it, glowing softly as if the flesh itself was letting them go. The first bead rolled down Mama Kesai's arm, landing in the dust beside Ebony's knees. Then another and another, until a small circle of light formed between them. Ebony cupped her hands together, and the beads rolled into her palms as if drawn home by unseen threads. When the last one lifted from Mama Kesai's heart, the glow around the room brightened, flooding everything with warm gold. The beads trembled for a moment, then began to merge, slowly, deliberately, fusing back into the shape of the necklace that had once adorned Ebony's neck. It gleamed brighter than she had ever seen, each bead clear as a tear, radiant as dawn. Mama Kasai watched through blurred eyes, her breath catching. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but they were no longer the bitter tears of guilt. They were the soft, cleansing tears of repentance. Her voice shook when she spoke. "They have left me," she whispered, touching her heart. "The weight, the fire, it's gone." She looked at Ebony with eyes that no longer held pride or resentment. Only gratitude. "You should hate me," she said weakly. "But you stayed." Ebony smiled faintly, her face shining with both sorrow and serenity. "My mother taught me that forgiveness is also a kind of protection," she said softly. "Hatred binds, but forgiveness frees." She reached forward and tied the glowing necklace back around her neck. It rested there, humming faintly, a living thing. The moment she did, a rush of wind swept through the open doorway, carrying with it the scent of wet soil. Then the first drop of rain fell. It splashed against the dusty floor, darkening it instantly. Another followed, and another, until a curtain of rain poured from the sky. The villagers, long weary from the dry season, began to emerge from their huts, their faces lifted toward the heavens. Children danced in the streets, shouting with joy. The parched earth drank eagerly, and the baobab trees swayed as though sighing in relief. Inside the hut, Ebony and Mama Kasai watched the rain in silence. Olu stood by the doorway, his eyes wet, not from the storm but from the sight of his wife and mother sitting side by side. Ebony reached for Mama Kasai's hand. The older woman hesitated, then clasped it tightly, her palm rough and warm. Outside, thunder rumbled softly, not in anger but in blessing. The rain washed away the dust of months and the bitterness of years. Inside, a family once divided by pride began to heal, each drop outside echoing the forgiveness that had finally taken root within. And through it all, the necklace at Ebony's throat glowed steadily, a symbol of peace restored and love reborn beneath the forgiving African sky. Days passed, and with each sunrise, the air around the compound felt lighter, cleansed of the weight that had long lingered in its corners. The rain that had fallen seemed to wash not just the earth but also the hearts of those who lived within its walls. The parched fields around the village had begun to turn green again. New shoots of maize peeked through the damp soil, and the scent of wet clay and growing life filled the mornings. Birds returned to the baobab trees, their songs carrying through the wind like a chorus of renewal. Inside the compound, everything had changed. The once proud Mama Kasai no longer barked orders or paraded her authority. Her voice, once sharp as a blade, had softened to a tone of quiet humility. Every morning she could be found sweeping the compound before sunrise, her back slightly bent, her eyes filled with gratitude. Sometimes she would pause near the threshold, where the rain had first entered on that fateful morning, and murmur prayers of thanks to the ancestors who had spared her. Ebony, once treated as a servant in her own home, was now seen as the heart of the household. She no longer moved in shadows or spoke in whispers. The same hands that had been used for chores now prepared meals for guests and wove mats for the market. When she walked through the village, women greeted her with smiles and respectful nods. Some even brought their daughters to meet her, whispering, "That is the bride whose beads cut truth into a heart." The story had spread far beyond the borders of their village, told by travelers at firesides, by griots in neighboring towns, by mothers to their children before sleep. Olu too had changed. Once hesitant and quiet in the face of his mother's dominance, he had learned to stand firm beside his wife. He saw now the quiet strength she had always carried, the grace in her forgiveness, the depth in her patience. Often, in the evenings, he would find her sitting under the baobab tree with the glowing necklace resting softly against her collarbone. He would join her there and they would talk about the past, not with bitterness but with gratitude for how far they had come. "You held our family together when we were breaking," he told her once, his voice low with awe. "Even when I couldn't see it." Mama Kasai, hearing those words, had wept silently in her room. She had come to love Ebony, not with the forced affection of duty, but with the genuine tenderness that only humility could bring. One afternoon she brought a small gourd filled with palm wine and placed it before Ebony as an offering of peace. "Let this be the end of the shadows," she said. "Your mother's necklace carried the truth my heart refused to see. May your kindness be my redemption." Ebony accepted, bowing her head. "The ancestors have already forgiven you," she replied softly. "Now it is time to forgive yourself." In the following weeks, the family performed a ceremony of restoration. At dawn they gathered by the river, the same river where Ebony had once dreamed of her ancestors. The priest stood before them, his cowrie shells glinting in the morning light, and offered libations to the spirits of water and truth. Mama Kasai poured palm wine into the flowing stream, whispering, "May the river carry away my pride and return only peace." Olu laid down a small carving of a heart-shaped bead made from wood, symbolizing healing. Ebony, holding her necklace, let one bead touch the surface of the river, watching the ripples spread in widening circles. When they returned home, something intangible yet undeniable had settled among them, an ease, a shared warmth. Meals were taken together now, laughter echoing once more through the courtyard. Even the servants who had once walked on eggshells around Mama Kasai found themselves smiling freely. At night, as the family gathered around the fire, the flames would sometimes flicker in such a way that they seemed to form patterns, circles like beads strung in the air, pulsing softly before fading into smoke. Ebony would smile when she saw them, knowing the ancestors were watching, content. The villagers noticed the transformation too. They said the family's compound glowed at dusk as if blessed by unseen hands. Some claimed to see a faint shimmer around Ebony when she moved, as though her mother's spirit still walked beside her. Farmers whose crops had wilted during the drought came to ask her for blessings before planting again. And she never refused anyone. Instead, she would tell them, "When you sow your seeds, speak truth into the soil. It listens." In time, the story of Ebony and her beads became legend. Mothers told their children that envy, once broken, can grow into love, that truth, once buried, will always rise, and that no heart is too hard for forgiveness to soften. The young girls who heard her story wore simple strings of seeds around their necks, calling them Ebony's beads, symbols of strength and honesty. As the seasons turned and the rains returned faithfully each year, Ebony's household remained a place of light. Mama Kasai, her hair now silver, would sit in the courtyard and watch her grandchildren play. Sometimes she would touch her chest where the beads had once burned and whisper a prayer of thanks to the woman she had once despised, the woman who had taught her that even broken hearts could shine again. And when night fell over the village, the drums would beat softly in the distance, echoing through the baobab groves. Each beat sounded like a heartbeat, steady, strong, alive. In that rhythm lived the story of a bride, a necklace, and the truth that bound them all, that the ancestors do not punish for cruelty's sake but to remind the living that love, when given freely, can heal even the deepest wound. Years rolled gently over the village like soft waves over sand, washing away the memory of pain but leaving behind the wisdom of its lessons. Ebony grew older, her hair touched by threads of silver, her eyes still bright as morning dew. Time had turned her story into a song the griots sang at moonrise, the tale of the bride whose beads cut truth into a heart. Her name had become a blessing spoken quietly in moments of hardship, a reminder that forgiveness could heal wounds deeper than blood. The village had changed, yet its spirit remained the same. The baobab trees still stretched toward the sky, their shadows long and wise across the earth. Children still played by the riverbanks, their laughter echoing through the reeds. On certain evenings when the sun dipped low and the light turned to gold, they claimed they could see something glimmering beneath the water, tiny lights, moving softly like beads drifting just beneath the surface. The elders would smile knowingly but never deny it. Some said the necklace's spirit lived there, watching, teaching, waiting. Mothers told their daughters, "Never break what protects another's spirit." It became more than advice, it became a proverb that carried through generations. When girls quarreled, their mothers would say it gently and peace would return between them. When jealousy brewed in households, someone would whisper, "Remember Mama Kasai," and silence would follow, filled with reflection. The lesson was carved into the heart of the community, that envy blinds but love restores sight, that no act of cruelty goes unseen by the ancestors, and that redemption is the truest form of beauty. Sometimes travelers passing through would stop by Ebony's home, hoping to see the legendary beads for themselves. She would welcome them with warmth, offering palm wine and roasted maize, and listen to their stories before sharing her own. But when they asked to see the necklace, she would simply smile and say, "The beads are not for the eyes but for the heart." Those who understood left humbled, their spirits lighter than when they arrived. As years turned to decades, Ebony became known as the village mother, a woman of calm wisdom whose presence felt like a blessing. Children often followed her as she walked to the river, their bare feet kicking up dust. She would pause, kneel by the water, and let her fingers drift through the surface. Sometimes a faint glow would ripple outward, spreading warmth through the air. The children would gasp, whispering that the ancestors were greeting her. On her final evening, as the sun began to set, Ebony sat beneath the same baobab tree where she had once prayed for strength as a young bride. The sky burned with colors, deep orange, royal gold and crimson red, each shade reflected in her eyes. Around her neck, the beads gleamed softly, as though holding the light of every sunset they had ever witnessed. She looked toward the horizon, where the river caught the sun's last glow and smiled, not with sorrow but with fulfillment. The drums began to beat in the distance, slow and steady, echoing the heartbeat of the land. The wind carried the scent of rain and flowers, mingling with laughter from the village. As the light faded, the necklace shimmered one last time, bright enough to make the river glow, soft enough to seem like a promise whispered into eternity. And when night finally settled, the story of Ebony and her beads lived on, in the songs of griots, in the whispers of the river, and in the hearts of those who believed that truth, once broken, could always be mended by love.